Namaste. My name is Saurabh Nanda, and welcome to another special episode of Such Conversations Matter. This episode is special because for the first time I'm inviting two people together on the show. These people are Miss Yasuka and Miss Emily Bailey, who live in Japan and are managing this very unique early childhood school, preschool, if you may, for students or for children between the ages of 2 to 6. They have really modern, progressive educational philosophies as to how to run the school, which involves nature, respect towards other human beings, and just a very international environment where children can thrive. Yasuka actually founded the school a few years ago, and Emily joined in and created this wonderful experience called AKG, how it exists today. I've been part of that school. I've had the opportunity to interact with the students and teach over there. It was very interesting, and we had long conversations about education and its various philosophies. And that is why I wanted to formalize such a conversation for this particular episode and bring it to you. So, please welcome Emily and Yasuka. Hi, guys. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, good.
I'm doing well too.
That's nice. Actually, when I see the background, I just get a little bit nostalgic. I remember all those times that I spent in Manavi, even though it was just last year. It still seems like it was ages ago because so many things have happened since then.
Yes, that's true. Plus, we've expanded the garden a little bit. We've got a lot more vegetables growing.
Oh, that's nice. That's always nice. So the kids must be having a lot more fun than just pulling out radishes. Now they can pluck other vegetables as well.
We do have a big variety, vegetables and herbs, lots of things going on.
That's brilliant. Let's begin the interview. Thank you so much, guys, for taking out time and doing this.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right. So I'm an educator, and this is why this is so interesting to me. And you guys are educators, so I want to know what's your story. So Yasuka-san, let's start with you. How did you get passionate about early education, early childhood education, and what has been your journey so far?
Well, I first began teaching when I was in college. I was doing music, so I began assistant teaching in music classes around the college. And the first two classes, or the first two schools that I had several classes in each of the schools, were a Montessori elementary school and a Montessori middle school. So my very first experience was with children who were very self-motivated, were very interested in what they were learning, who also had the freedom to not be in class if they didn't want to. So it was a very student-directed environment that I taught in. And that felt very comfortable with me. I did not want to teach someone who is not interested, someone who is passionate about something else. I've always thought that that person should have that freedom, just as much as I had my freedom to really delve into what I was passionate in. So I had those very first, very good teaching experiences. Which were kind of set aside as I went into my own performance career. But when I had my two children, they are now 6 and 4. When I had them, I began looking into childhood education, how to give the best for my own children, as any parent would do. And as I got more into it, I realized that I have very big and very specific things that I wanted to do with my children. And the more I thought about it, more I wanted to give that myself as their mother and as someone who has been in education before.
I just get curious a lot. So I also want to know, so your passion towards early childhood education, does it also come from your experiences before college, like when you were younger and the things that you liked, and somehow, it remained in your mind that this is something that my children should also experience? So you decided to do something about it.
Curiously enough, I was never totally in love with children or babies. I was not the person who would walk down the street and be in love with every baby I meet. But I had a very good childhood where I was able to. First, I grew up in the States. I'm a Japanese. I grew up in the States, so being bilingual and also being in the multicultural setting came very naturally to me. And as a grown-up, I really appreciated that kind of environment. And I also appreciate the fact that I am bilingual. And also, I was really into music and dance at the time and was able to really delve into those passions from early elementary school on. And a very free kind of a childhood, which I now look back and think how privileged I was, that I was not forced to do what everyone should be doing, but that I was able to really dive into what I wanted to do. And from that, stemming from those passions, I studied a lot of different areas, early childhood education included, which now, which I think complements me a lot now as a grown-up.
That's amazing. Emily, what about you? How did you get involved in this?
Well, sort of different to Yasu's story. For a long time, I didn't have anything specific that I was particularly passionate about. I sort of felt a bit aimless until I was around 8 years ago. I sort of accidentally fell into education when I helped my mum's class on a field trip to the farm, and it was just like something sparked in me, just watching these 4 and 5 year old children discover things, walking around and looking at what they wanted to do, and so it just sparked something in me. So I went and got my qualifications, and I've been in education ever since. So I've worked in quite a lot of educational settings, but I really found my passion for early years and special educational needs. So that's what I decided to focus on. It feels very important to me.
That's very interesting, and I think it's very important that you know the story behind somebody who gets into education, because for me at least that forms a great motivation to continue in education and always provide the best to your students and the parents. All right, so quickly moving on to the fact which got me really interested about AKG when I spent time with you guys over there, was the Montessori method, because I had never heard about it. Please tell me and everyone who's listening to this, what is the Montessori method or Montessori education?
Yes, AKG does incorporate the Montessori philosophy, which is based on the child-led learning, which basically means we follow the child. It is based on an understanding that the child knows what he or she should do in order to grow. So just like a little baby, when the baby is about to walk, the baby would stand up and try to walk a few steps, fall, get back again, do more, few more steps, fall, and just repeat that over and over and over. It is that Montessori points out, which is the driving force behind all of the learning that a child does. So that is a very visible example, but also the cognitive, the intellectual learning that happens within a child, Montessori also believes it really stems from the child himself. So if he's interested in something, if a child is interested in learning how to read or write, then the child has this driving force within him, and he will absorb as much as he wants and he can about the reading and writing without adults telling him what to do, without the adults providing him with all the workbooks and all the lessons that adults may think that he needs. Because I was in music, I met a lot of other colleagues who were raised in this childless learning way, and they're very self-motivated, and they are very passionate about learning because they've directed their learning the whole time ever since their early childhood. So I love that about the Montessori philosophy. AKG is not a Montessori school in that we don't use the Montessori materials. The Montessori materials were developed so that children in the classroom setting can learn in the self-directed way. But as a nature forest school-based environment at AKG, we spend most of the time outside. So we try to incorporate the Montessori philosophy, which is the self-directed learning, with not the teaching, but a guidance of adults outwards.
Interesting. What do you think, Emily? How do you interpret the Montessori method?
Well, while I was working in England in education, soon after I was qualified, I had the opportunity to spend some time at a school that followed the Montessori philosophy. And I was amazed to see the direction that these children had. Even at 3 and 4 years old, they had they were already making decisions about how and what they wanted to learn. They were following their curiosities in healthy ways that made them enthusiastic about learning. And even down to things like conflict resolution, they were able to handle those situations on their own. And at that age, we so many places already know to put the foundation education in, teaching them how to count and how to recognize letters and things. But the way that the Montessori philosophy works, it also develops the child as a whole. So it's not only, the academic part of them that's growing, it's them as a person that's growing. And I find that amazing, and I think it's really important. It's it's something I'm passionate about. Can you tell?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think rightly so. The biggest 5 companies in the world are tech companies. And the founders of Google, the founder of Microsoft, the founder of Amazon, they're all big promoters of the Montessori method. So is there something common between those guys and setting up tech shops, which will become the biggest companies in the world, and the Montessori method? Do you think there's a relation there?
I think there is. And going back to something that Yasuki said, that the people she'd met that had experienced this child-led learning education had that motivation and that drive to do what they wanted to do, to put the work behind their passion and know how to do that, because they know their own mind and they know how they work. And I think that is what makes a lot of these people successful, is that they're using their passion to fuel themselves, because they know the way they work because of this education style.
I also think self-directed education, it leads to people who can learn themselves and who will recognize what needs to be learned for their future. So according to Montessori philosophy, the teacher does not give work to the students or assign learning materials, but all the learning is initiated by the student. The student says, I want to learn this or that, and the teacher can guide them. Montessori materials can guide them, but they're not there to direct what they learn. And I do think that led to adults who can recognize problems in the society, in the world, and knew how to think, how to be creative, and create new things like the new technology that didn't exist in the world at that time, but they were able to create that because that is what they thought the world needed, and that they had the motivation and the means to pursue that passion.
That's very interesting because when you guys described about the Montessori method, I could understand that self-awareness is a huge key in the Montessori method. That if the students, even though they're very young, and we definitely underestimate our children, if they are self-aware, they will automatically gravitate or move towards things they want to learn because that's just their natural inclination. So if they're good at languages, probably they'll move towards, learning the language. Or if they're good at, if they have good hand-eye coordination, they will just move outside and start doing sports or something related to that. So if that is the case, why do we have a system where these things are kind of sidelined and more focus is there on the curriculum?
I think that certainly in, I speaking from my experience, certainly in England we have a lot of standardized testing, and there seems to be a list of points that the children are supposed to memorize, and I think this is because it's more challenging to evaluate someone's progression using sort of the Montessori philosophy or child-led learning philosophy, because there are no boxes you can tick. You can't say, okay, you wanted to learn how to write and you went and found a pencil, 5 out of 10, good job. There is no sort of assessment checklist for it. So I think that poses a difficulty for some people and for some communities and some governments, because it's difficult to show the evidence, especially short term. Whereas if they looked at the big picture, if they looked at long term, if they looked at the child as a whole, they would see that it is much more beneficial to do it this way.
I don't think you want to get me started on this.
Please do get started.
But for one thing, this modern classroom education, where multiple children of single age groups are put into a single classroom and educated in the same way, is a relatively new phenomenon, started around the Industrial Revolution. But please don't get me started on this. However, it is much more difficult, as Emily said, to get to know children and to evaluate them on a non-visible, non-data based system. The average teacher to student ratio of preschools, Montessori preschools, is anywhere from 3 to 10 kids per adult. And for school too, it's about 5 to 10 kids per adult worldwide. And I think that is because it is much more difficult to know the children, know them well enough to realize what they want to learn. And also to be responsible for their safety while they're exploring their passions. If each child is following his or her own passions, that would mean that if there are 5 kids in the classroom, there will be 5 different things going on. If there are 15 kids in the classroom, there will be 15 different activities going on at 15 different levels. That is a lot harder to manage. And with the cities and the education systems and the whole lifestyle of parents and children this age, that is very difficult to manage system-wise. I hope that with the new normal after this pandemic situation, and also with other problems that are rising in the society as a whole, that the new more individualized attention and educational system would become more popular.
Interesting, very interesting. So you said the system, creating a system for the Montessori schools is a problem, and since we're already used to a system, we just continue with it. Is it really that expensive or technically difficult to teach teachers about the Montessori method?
No, I don't think so. I think, especially with educators that are already passionate about the Montessori philosophy, about child-led learning philosophy, I think that a lot of people who do feel that way would be quite open to sharing their experiences. It's a sort of mindset that goes well with collaboration.
Hmm.
But even just rolling out education, teacher training, things like that, I think it's not going to be any more difficult or expensive than the current systems of teacher training and the current ways we train people to be educators. I think probably the biggest expense would be creating those environments where there is a more individualized learning experience and it's less top down. But I personally, I don't think profits should matter when we're talking about educating the next generation. But that's my opinion.
And I think it's a very valid opinion. Some countries are leading the way. Finland, for example, is a very good example of this, in that they've moved the profits out of the picture when it comes to education. So, very interesting question again regarding profits. Montessori method is not very well known, at least in my part of the world. There are people who do it, but generally it's just not popular because people don't know about it. So the people who do it, they do it in very small boutique schools. And if you have to run those schools, you have to charge money, which is on the higher side than a regular preschool, right? So ultimately, Montessori Montessori method and education is only available to the rich and people who have access. So does it create a problem for the popularity of Montessori method? Oh, so like the policymakers think, oh, this is for the rich people. This is not really for everyone else.
I think good education, it should be for everyone. That everyone, regardless of their social or economic status, should be able to choose the best education system that fit their own family styles and values. But with that said, of course, the money is a big issue. Same here in Japan. And not only the Montessori methods, but in so-called progressive methods in general. AKG, I think, is one of them. We are a forest school style preschool that incorporates the Montessori philosophy, which two of them put together does create a very high-end requirement, both on the teacher's side, on how high on the educational quality and standards on the teacher's side. And also, it does limit the number of students that each adult can be responsible for, which ultimately results in a smaller class. However, I do think, as Emily said, the expense should not matter when it comes to education. And also, there are so many passionate teachers or would-be teachers who are able to do this kind of education if they had the chance. So we at AKG, it may be going on to another point here, but I would like to create a system where we can provide good education and also have a profit system that is not taking away from the families who need the education, who may not have the freedom to spend all that much.
Right. So, okay. And since we talked about the system, I'm going to move on to the second observation that I made from your original comment, that children experience and then they learn from that experience. And that's true for all human beings. In fact, we as human beings have failed as a species, if you ask me, because there is so much knowledge with us. I mean, even if you look at the last 70 years, there is so much knowledge available to us, but we still do not use that knowledge and experience of the previous leaders to make policies or make decisions which are good for the future, right? So human beings are generally stubborn and bad at learning from experience. Do you think the Montessori method, it encourages learning from experience? Do you think that makes it better for children, or how do you see that?
It is hard for me to say. I think Montessori philosophy and experience-based child-directed style of learning definitely encourages children to grow up to be self-motivated and self-directed adults, so that they can evaluate and act on their own values, what each person thinks is right or good for the society, which could be both good or bad. And that's why I think education should be of good quality, so that whatever the children learn will be positive, would be a positive asset for the society, not a negative one. But it also, I think, prevents people, grown-ups, from just following leaders blindly, but instead to assess what is good, what is bad, to evaluate their own values and their beliefs, and act accordingly for the betterment of the society.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that while child-led learning philosophies and methods do definitely help children to grow up into people that can experience things and then learn from those experiences, it also helps them discover, as Yasuki said, their values, and it helps them understand their values, other people's values, the way things work, so that then they grow into people who can learn not only from their own experiences, but understand experiences of others and understand the way things work, which gives them, which can help them change and make decisions on that as well. So it kind of, in my opinion, it would kind of stop the issue of, us not learning from previous people, from, not learning from history and thus being doomed to repeat it. That kind of mindset that the child-led learning approach creates would stop that.
Okay. So I have an interesting story I would like to share here. One of my colleagues, she's also into education in India, and she deals in the same sector, high school students and young college students like I do. Her child, she wanted her to have the best education possible. So she put her in this really expensive school, but that's not the point I'm trying to make here. She put her in this really expensive school with a lot of nature and a lot of the philosophies that we talked about just now, Montessori philosophies, expressing yourself very well. And her daughter, when she reached the 5th grade in India, all right, she could talk about LGBTQ rights. So she had such a freedom of expression and opinion, which is really rare for an Indian kid to do or an Asian kid to do, right? But at the same time, when she thought, okay, so this is really good, you have developed into your own individual, but let's see how well your studies are. So her daughter could not clear the entrance examination for a 2nd grade test in a regular school in India, because she just did not have the right math skills or the right language skills, both in English and Hindi, to clear that exam, which was, so she could not understand how to deal with that situation. You invested a lot of money, so you have a very nice education which gives you the freedom of expression, but then you don't have the right tools to succeed in the education system already there. How do you compensate for something like this?
I think that's a difficult question, definitely. But I think the issue lies in the expectations. By enrolling her daughter into child-led learning, Montessori philosophy style education, and also expecting her to pass the standardized testing, they're kind of opposites. And I would argue that if this child at grade 5 wasn't able to pass the grade 2 exam because of difficulties in mathematics or language, as you said, but her values and her social understanding sounds quite high from the brief amount that you said. So I would argue that perhaps her strengths lie in places other than mathematics, and I would argue that she's perhaps a more well-rounded, self-aware person than somebody who could tick the right boxes on a piece of paper.
Interesting.
Well, I think that is more not a problem. What's the word I'm looking for? More a problem with how you measure what you've been doing or where the values lie. It's sort of I sort of see it as if you enroll your child in a Spanish school and you complain that the kid doesn't have a French ability, that's not comparing. That's not saying anything about the Spanish school. It's just saying that the child has not had the French training, that the French test required. And I see it sort of in similar regards. The school that your friend's daughter went to probably held value systems that were different from the standardized school system values. So I'm sorry to hear that the daughter did not pass the second grade exam, but perhaps she did pass the 5th grade. Her school's own evaluation systems,
right?
And not to be a child that the school that matches the school's value system. And how about the other way around? Do the children who go through the regular school system, would they pass the examination or the evaluation system of this daughter's school? Not to say that one is right or one is superior to the other, but I think there are two totally different value systems, and maybe we could look at it in a longer term than just second grade or 5th grade.
So that's very well put. I mean, both of you, thank you so much for that insight. So moving away from children, we come to the parents then, right? So yes, as you rightly said, Emily, their expectations, and as you rightly said, the measurement of the performance of the child should be different. Now, how do they cope up with this? Also, the second part of the question is, at least I live in an Indian society which is very hierarchical. So if my child or if somebody's child is speaking up against me, then this is a very normal viewpoint of the parents. How could a child speak up against me on a topic which I don't agree with? Because these children will have these qualities to express themselves, right? How do the parents deal with that? Because a lot of parents will just not go into this education system only because they don't want their children, according to them, to be, loud-mouthed or something like that.
That is the situation here in Japan too. A lot of the parents are afraid that the children will have different value systems and beliefs than their own. So they're afraid to send their children to any other school systems than the public education system. I think there is a different ways to incorporate Montessori or other progressive educational systems within each of the cultures. And the self-directed learning of the Montessori philosophy, I think I said this earlier, stems from the belief that the child knows how to learn, which is saying that you're respecting the child's own values, the child's own thinking ability. So maybe there could be a midway between respecting the child as a person, as someone who knows about himself or herself, and also having the child understand your own values as a parent. And instead of requiring the child to follow blindly, perhaps the problem could be achieved by talking equally between each other.
I agree that there is this sort of middle ground that could be really beneficial to everybody. And I would say that the kind of parents that are looking at enrolling their children into child-led learning education styles, possibly are a little more open to the idea of their child being what was it you said, loudmouth?
Loudmouth, yeah. I mean, I will not even say outspoken, because outspoken is kind of a positive word, maybe neutral,
Okay.
but loudmouth is clearly negative, It's against our culture.
Yeah, and I think it's an issue of perception, and I think if we can, collectively look at this in a positive light, and instead of worrying that a child will talk back or speak up against an opinion, instead look at it as an opportunity to grow for everybody, an opportunity for a discussion. And as Yassi mentioned about following blindly, following instructions and not understanding why, it doesn't have much more meaning than just the physical action of doing those instructions. There isn't any understanding, and with the child-led learning approaches, that's really encouraged. So while they're in the educational setting, they're really in control of what they're doing. They're free to speak up against anything, but the skills that gives them allows them to then go home and be able to have a discussion and understand why something has to be done. And once they understand how and why something should be done, they're more likely to do it in a positive way, to enjoy doing it even, and to understand other people's motives. Yeah, so I think if we can all sort of shine a positive light on this and explore the understanding that it can give children and their parents, I think that's probably the way forward.
That is really interesting to know. And from an educator's point of view, I completely understand, what you're saying, that it has to go like that. But then, again, coming back to a parent's perspective, somebody who comes from an Indian society or an Asian society in general, because that's something I can talk about, and they have problems with questions like, if the child comes up and asks, how does sex happen, and all these questions, because the information is available so easily now to children, and these conversations happen all around us, the parents immediately become very uncomfortable. So even though you're encouraging them to ask questions, but you're not ready to give them answers, right? Okay, so that was just my observation, and I'm going to link this observation to the next question that I'm going to ask you guys. So the demographics of the world, at least 2/5, if not more, come from China and India. And in the next 30, 40 years, they're going to lead the world in a lot of different social aspects as well. In China, there are more than 3,000 Confucianism-led schools. In India, there is a growing trend, and I think it's in the early hundreds, 200 or 300 schools are there already in India. They are the Gurukul-based schools. So in Confucianism, there are a set of rules. Confucius thought that this is required, discipline is required in life. So the parents agree with that. They don't want, Western influences to come into their children's thought process. And in India, it's the Gurukul system of the Vedic times 3,000 years ago, where the guru or the teacher is supposed to know everything, because the gurus in those times, they were scientists and philosophers, so they were like super geniuses. So whatever they said and did, it was very, very accurate. But we don't have those gurus anymore. But still, the belief is there in the Gurukul system and in the Confucianism system. How do we take the parents away from those thought processes into this modern way of thinking?
I actually think that here at AKG we have aspects of both of those philosophies. The Confucianism is a learner-centered educational approach, and that's something that we really believe in. And the Gurukul system relies on somebody being there as a guide, and that's what we do as educators here. And in child-led learning approaches, we're here to guide. So I think there are aspects that we could connect the dots and be able to show parents and show people in other cultures, maybe we're not so different. And I think we could definitely use that as a bridge to connecting that way and this way.
On top of that, I think this is a problem not only in education, but in globalization in general. There are different ways of family life, as you mentioned. There are all different cultures, different food, different everything according to where you live or what you believe in. And I don't think AKG is the only way or is the right way to do education. I think there are many other ways that provide very good encouragement for different kinds of children. I'm hoping that AKG can serve to those who really likes or who will really benefit from this AKG way of education. What I would like to see in the future is that different ways of education, of family life, of school life, and cultures in general are respected and admitted, so that whatever differences that people experience are also respected, and the freedom given to each person to choose or to follow through what they believe in without negating the other aspects. We see that in professions. We see professionals in different fields, and we say, oh, that person is really good in science, that person is really excels at sports. Very normal to us. And I hope that would expand to other areas of our beliefs and cultures, so that we can say, well, that person believes in a very strict way of family life, and that works for that family. But maybe for us, we're different, and we are happy in our own way. I hope that respect and admittance would expand.
Guys, I think we have set the right foundation, and we've talked about the right educational philosophy so far, so that we can introduce AKG. So please tell us, what is AKG? What are the founding principles? What do you guys do there? And why are you guys having so much fun?
That's a great question. AKG, it stemmed actually from my very personal children. I wanted to give the best for my children, and I had certain aspects that I really wanted to incorporate in their lives and in our family life. One is nature. I really believe that nature has everything that a child and a grown-up too, that anyone needs in order to be healthy and in order for a child to grow up as a complete person, physically, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically. So nature was very important, and I also really believe in the Montessori philosophy of the child-led learning, the self-directed lifestyle. And I wanted to combine those two. And there weren't very many schools that offered that particular combination, and definitely not around where I live. So that's how AKG came to be. Two very strong beliefs that I have for children. And because I believe that these are very important qualities for my children, I wanted other children who would want this to also be able to have this. And create a big family of people who believe in these two, for me, what is very important values.
Wow. Yes, Emily, what do you think?
Okay. Well, I feel really lucky to have found AKG because it's something that I can be really passionate about. When I first came to AKG, I was amazed by the way that the children were encouraged to immerse themselves in the nature, and the environment that we have here in Awaji is just perfect for that. It's an incredible environment, and the way the children were so engaged outside with no screens and no plastic toys and no workbooks, and they were thriving. So I wanted to bring some of my experience and my values and passions to AKG. So I worked very closely with Yasi and with the whole team here to build our current curriculum that really focuses on those values that we are also passionate about here.
One thing that I didn't mention specifically is the international aspect at AKG, which is really important. Having grown up bilingually myself and having been in the multicultural, multilingual society all through my life, I believe that being bilingual or knowing more than one language is is the shortest way and the most effective way to get to know other cultures. And being able to learning a second language in the early years before you are set in your own language, in your own culture as the basis of your life. Before that happens, getting to learn another language and another culture through that language is a very effective way to really organically organically feel that your way is not the only way. Your way to speak is not the only way to speak. But there are other people with other communication tools, and behind that, other value systems. So that the language aspect is very important. That's why at AKG, we teach children, but in a way that keeps the child-directed play and child-led learning. So we keep classroom setting to a minimum, and English is taught through free play.
That's amazing. I also completely share that thought. And I think the Scandinavian countries, including the Netherlands, they've shown this process where they've made their children bilingual by teaching them English as well, so that their brain functions improve as well. Also, I personally believe in this because I feel the world is getting closer and closer together, especially because of the internet. And for example, I can relate with you guys much more than maybe 1,000 people around me here, and probably you guys can have a similar experience there. So there are people around the world who share the same philosophy, but they're just away from each other geographically. But if we have a common language to speak, then we're close, right? So that's what my next question is. Do you think for a more globalized world where more and more people are connecting with each other. Places like the AKG, the Awaji Kids Garden, are important so that more respect and more understanding comes into being when these kids, these 4 or 5-year-old kids, turn into adults.
I think absolutely so. Yeah, and the exposure to the international concept here is one of the most important things to us. We've been really lucky to have had guest teachers in from literally all over the world. We were very lucky to have you as a guest teacher to come in, and so children being able to meet all these people from all these different places, coupled with the child-led learning approach, means that they get to ask questions that they want to know about different cultures and experiences and values, and having that in their foundation, having that so early in their life, really sets the basis for an open-minded, globally focused mindset and going. Sorry, it really focuses them to be able to work with people from all over the world, connect with people from all over the world, and I think you're right. The world is getting closer and closer, and this sort of paves the way for us all being Earthlings, all being Earthlings together.
Absolutely, very well said.
So, human beings.
Oh, absolutely. But I also think at the same time, just to talk about the language aspect. So India is it's like 20 countries into one. All right, and we all speak different languages, eat different food, and look different. For us, the lingua franca also became English, just like for the rest of the world now. But even after that lingua franca is there, we use that second language only for very formal conversations and not really going beyond that, because a lot of people might still be comfortable in their native tongue, and that barrier is still to be crossed yet when you personally become comfortable with the other person. And I think that we'll have a few years to definitely do that. What are your plans for the future of AKG when it comes to things like these? How do you want to expand? Where do you want to go? What other philosophies do you want to include?
May I go back to the last question?
Sure,
and add on to what Emily said about guest teachers and how lucky we are to have you and guests from all over the world. I think our strength at AKG lies in the fact that the guest teachers do not really teach, but they play. You included. They play with the children outside. So from the children's point of view, I hope that the guest teachers are not guests from teachers teaching them about their own countries, but just friends who just happen to have different languages, or who just happen to speak different languages, or who just happen to look differently or think differently. And I'm hoping that the children of AKG will grow up to have the feeling that whomever they meet around the world in the future, that they will have this deep understanding within them that they can connect and have fun with them as friends, and not as someone from a foreign country who are different from them. So in that aspect, I'd like AKG to, of course, expand, not really as a business, but as a place where children can really connect with other people of different cultures, who may speak different languages, who may have different mindsets or values or food that they eat, but who will just become friends with them. And that really happens not from us as grown-ups telling them, okay, you be friends with Saurabh because he comes from India. I don't think that is the way to go. It's any friendship, any love for other people really stems from that own person. So I hope that this child-led learning, where the child is free to explore their own passions and their own curiosities, and also meet other people and have some tools to communicate with them. It is English, and English would be the common language in the future too, so that they can become friends and have fun with everyone.
So guys, there's this very important question, which we cannot escape actually. So I've seen you guys work in AKG. You're so personal with the students and everything, and there is a clear lack of technology or screens in the classroom setting or outside. But most of the education systems around the world, they're moving towards screens, and especially during the lockdown, it has just proved the fact that screens are going to be the future of education. How do we counter the fact that the children who study at AKG don't have any screens, but when they go back home, there are screens all around?
That's a really good question. I think that when children come to AKG, it provides that time for them to step away from the screens and step more into themselves and into nature. And while doing that, they are exploring their own values and interests. And I would say that quite a lot of children that come to AKG take those interests home with them. So even though they go home and there's a TV and a laptop and a tablet, all these things, they are still focused on what they learned at AKG and thinking, oh, today I made a necklace out of leaves. I wonder what I'm going to do next week. So I would say having this sort of experience does go home with them. But also, I agree that it's an inescapable issue, an inescapable part of life now, and actually that we are using it in a way. So during the lockdown, while the schools have been closed, we've been teaching on Zoom. So the children that usually come to AKG and children from other places, children that live, we've had students from Tokyo that have joined in, and what they're getting, or what they got during this lockdown, was a little part of the nature experience. Seeing the nature and ideas and support on how to use nature in their home lives. So I think that while we don't use screens at AKG, we are open to the fact that technology can help us and help the children sort of explore things they might not be able to explore otherwise.
I totally agree with how screens and the technology can be a very useful and positive tool in this world. And I think all of us in the world recognize that after this pandemic, we're able to connect with people all over the world. Even if we cannot be with them physically, we are able to learn and grow. And we are able to learn using the technology. But it still remains, I think, a tool for us, a tool to connect with people, a tool for learning, a tool for getting what we cannot get physically. I think the problem comes when the screens or the technology begins to not be only a tool, but to be the controller of our life. That's when we lose ourselves as human beings and become sort of the servant to the technology, which cannot. I know there are different arguments, but I do believe that since technology is made by humans, there are aspects of it that cannot exceed the humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that at AKG, it is not that we're not using the computer or that we're avoiding the screens, but I think that especially in the early years, there are more things to be gained by being in nature, by being in outside and by being in personal contact with each other than through screens. And that's why we focus on it. And I hope that children will realize the values and the positive assets that personal contact and nature provide for them, so that when they grow up, or if they go outside of AKG and they use the screens or the technology, that they will be able to use them as a positive tool rather than controlling a device that controls them.
Awesome. So guys, thank you so much for taking out time. And before we wind up the interview, I would like each of you to give a small message to all the parents and probably students listening, so that they know that there are other systems of education available which can open up your minds in probably different ways, which will be probably more beneficial to them than the regular system, right? So just one message. We'll start with you, Emily.
Okay. I think that if more people were to explore this I think if more people were to explore this self-driven sort of philosophy around education, then we would all know ourselves and know each other a little better.
Absolutely.
I hope that there will be more people who would resonate with having the respect for children as someone who knows and who is able to, who are able to pursue their own passions and their own curiosities, and stepping from that, respect other people who have their own passions and curiosities, and so that we can create a diverse but unified world.
Great. Very nice. And so there you have it, guys. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much, Yasi, for taking out time. And I hope you guys enjoyed the interview, because these are the kind of conversations I loved having when I was working with them in Japan. And we shared so many similar aspects. There are more things, we talked about, like the future of jobs, how it will be. And I think we both can agree on the fact that in the future, technology will take over most of the jobs, but teaching is something that humans will stick to, because, well, we understand ourselves better than any machine, right? Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much, Yasuka-san, for being here.
Thank you very much.
All right, see you, and keep doing the good work. Bye.